We appreciate your interest in our company, but we regret to inform you that as of now, we do not offer internship opportunities to students. Last summer, my inbox was filled with emails like this because I had sent out my CVs to a couple of companies hoping to intern with them over the summer. But after being rejected by the 9th one and not having gotten a reply from the other 11, I was understandably upset, right? Mostly because I was looking forward to actually waking up before 1 in the afternoon and doing something productive with my summer. So I looked online. Now, there's literally a company that will sell you a pet rock. So there had to be something that solved my problem, right? I mean, all I wanted to do was an internship. But there wasn't. So now I had two options. One was to continue sending emails and making phone calls, and maybe at one point I would annoy someone enough for them to actually give me an internship. Or I could put on my black turtleneck and solve the problem myself. And the first option was certainly easier, but the second one was a lot cooler, and that's exactly what I did. Maybe I was watching way too much Silicon Valley, but in a leap of faith, I decided I was going to start a startup. My startup was called youthseek.com, and what it aimed to do was be an internship site for students here in the UAE. The thing is, the culture with us over here is we like to be pampered and we don't really get out of our houses. So the culture of doing an internship by the time we are 16 or 17 isn't really there with most students. And I aim to solve this problem. Now, as cool as it would be to come out here and say that my startup became massively successful and made me a millionaire at the age of 17, I can't, because that never really happened. What happened was my startup ended up never getting off the ground, and I ended up with a little less money in my pocket than I had when I started. But some good did come out of me being a pseudo Steve Jobs for a couple of months and screwing up. I learned a few lessons that I would have never learned in a classroom or out of a book, and I managed to push myself out of my comfort zone. So tonight, I want to talk about the lessons I learned from a startup that almost started. And the first one is how to land a meeting with absolutely anybody. So the first order of business, after spending several long showers coming up with a name, the first thing I had to do was lay the groundwork for my startup, right? I realized I had to get a couple of companies to work with me and provide internships on my website. So I made a list. I noted companies, everything from electronic stores to fashion stores to cinema chains and everything in between that I thought teens would probably want to intern at. I wrote an email and I basically explained what I wanted, what my pain point was, how I was going to solve it, and how I wanted them to help me by posting internship opportunities on their site. The idea was that if I could get more kids excited about doing an internship, because let's face it, we're almost always broke, that way there would be a steady line of kids who are interested in doing an internship rather than a one-off kid. And in that way, I was hoping companies would actually find value in having a well-structured internship program. So I sent this email out, and for a week, I got no replies. Now that got me thinking, was I doing something wrong? Or had every company in the UAE collectively decided to block my email? So I went back to the drawing board, and I read my email again. And I realized one thing. I kept asking for things. I said what my pain point was, how I experienced it, how I was planning on solving the problem, what I wanted from them. But I never really touched on what was in it for them. And it seems trivial, but I missed that completely. So I scrapped that whole idea, and I went back to the drawing board and rewrote the email. This time I made sure that I focused on the points of value that I was including in for them. I mentioned how having an internship program would create youthfulness in the work environment and how it would boost the brand loyalty of the company among the eyes of the teenage youth. And about 2 days later, I got an email. It said that the head of HR of a popular retail company wanted to meet with me. I was over the moon. It actually worked. So come Sunday, I came to school, I wrote a physics exam, I somehow left school early, and I also changed into a suit in a cramped petrol station toilet, and eventually made it in time for my meeting. And I walked away with 10 internship openings across 5 stores in the UAE. And I realized there's a very simple key to this, right? And if you get this one thing right, you basically hacked your way into anyone's office. And that's making it look like you're giving more value than you're expecting back. If you can get this one simple thing right, which is very hard to do, but all you have to basically do is figure out what someone values, and once you know that, you need to figure out how you can add more value to that. And if you can create that, I promise you that you can land a meeting with absolutely anyone you want. So now I had my first partner, I had a couple of internships, but I didn't have a site yet. And so that's what I had to build next. And that's what taught me my next lesson, and that's building something great is a lot easier than it seems. Now, initially, when I started building the website, I wanted to code it right. I mean, how else were they going to include a cool coding scene when they make a movie about it? But okay, jokes aside, but the real reason why I did that was because I'd been dabbling in JavaScript for a while, and I thought maybe this would be a good opportunity to brush up on those skills and actually build something cool while I'm at it. So I picked this up. I spent a good month and a half going through this, wrapping my head around the concepts. And when I was done, I realized that I had grossly overestimated my ability to pick up new skills because the final product looked something like this. Now it was pretty basic and it got the job done, but it just wasn't what I wanted to put out there. I really wanted my first product to be incredibly high quality and be very functional, which this wasn't. And so I stumbled upon this one day. And right off the bat, it seems like a WordPress template, right? What is that? Well, I looked a bit into this and I found that it looked really good. It had all the features I wanted, but I just wasn't sure. And then I found these. These were a couple of plugins that let me add features and code to my site that would normally take me months to implement with JavaScript in a couple of minutes. And it got me thinking how easy it is and how low the barrier of entry is for someone to create something cool today. Instead of spending months, a decade ago, you'd have to spend months and tens of thousands of dollars to try and get a proper developer to build something for you. And even then, it wouldn't be that cool. But today, with an afternoon and in the fraction of a cost, you can build an incredibly good-looking, very functional website all by yourself with no skills required. And that brings me, so now I had an actual now I had a crappy looking JavaScript website. I was a couple months behind my schedule because of all the time I wasted. And that brings me to my next lesson, and that's the importance of starting. So with all this talk, with all this work that I was putting into the site, and how easy it was for me to add and create and customize the site, I got a little bit carried away. So I was spending way too much time on all the little details, and I thought every little feature was integral to the core product. And any entrepreneur worth their salt knows the concept of an MVP, right? It's basically a minimum viable product. And I thought I was doing that. I thought I was building an MVP. But in reality, I was trying to push out 90% of my features in about 10% of the time. This was an actual MVP. I know it wasn't the most good looking and the most functional or packed with the most features, but it got the job done. And it was functional for what it was. Had I launched with this, I would have at least got the ball rolling and improvements could have always come later. But instead, I chose to waste time trying to keep the fonts across my website consistent and kept delaying and pushing the launch backwards. And that brings me to my next lesson. And that's a good team is everything. Now, that's pretty generic advice, right? Any book you pick up on entrepreneurship or startups will tell you that you have to have a good team. The thing is, YouthSeek never had a great team at all. Let me rephrase, we never had a team at all. The only people who knew what I was working on were a few close friends, and that's it. And while they were all incredibly capable, I had this fear in the back of my mind that maybe they won't care about the product as much as me. And maybe I can't expect them to work as hard as me. And that's what kept me hesitant from asking for help. And because of this, I had bitten off way more than I could swallow. My days went with writing emails and making phone calls that I barely had time to do anything else. And had I had a team, I would have at least gotten MVP out a little quicker and would have had a few heads to bounce ideas off of. And that would have saved me from a couple of blunders and screw-ups I did along the way. And that brings me to my last lesson, and that's don't forget about regulation. So finally, right, after going back and forth and right when I was about to launch, me being the idiot I am, decided to look at regulations at the last moment. And that's what came back to bite me. I realized that starting something is not as easy as the movies and the TV shows make it look. You can't just build or code something one night and then put it out there and then have thousands of users the next morning. there's a lot of steps that go between finished product to actually launching to market. And especially here in the UAE, where things are a little bit more regulated than some other parts of the world, it's a bit more difficult to actually start something. At first, I required an actual office space, which I found out was compulsory, and my bedroom didn't really qualify. And the only other option I had was to join an incubator program, which also didn't make much sense because I was entering my final year of high school, and I just didn't think I'd had the time to devote that much commitment to an actual startup while still balancing my studies. And so, unfortunately, I had to shelve the project. It just didn't make much sense at the time. But there's a silver lining to this. I'm not too disappointed by YouthSeek.com's failure because, well, I mean, there were a lot of things wrong from the start and a lot of things I could have done right. But it left me more inspired because for me, I was solving a problem that was personal to me. I experienced it, a couple of my friends experienced it, and so I was passionate about solving it. And similarly, we find ourselves in places throughout life where we understand the problem better than most people. If you're a doctor, you'll understand the problem that doctors face better than most people. If you're a teacher, you'll understand the problems teachers face better than most people. And that puts you in a unique position to go out and solve that problem. And if you want to do it, it's never been easier to do so. Because if a 16-year-old could come this close to starting a startup out of his bedroom, just imagine what you can do.